welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. As we enter the month of February, we're reminded of some of the more notable holidays is Valentine's Day and our connections that usually get um, we can actually have struggles with just how we connect. Valentine's Day a lot of times promotes how we relate in the romantic sense, but how do we relate to our friends, family, community, church, wherever you're at? Sometimes can speak louder and actually impact us more. I want to also share that we have a new guest. Her name is Delia. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insight and being part of the discussion today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
I also want to share, I don't know if you know in the UK, but in the States, if you are in crisis, if you need professional help, it's 988. But whatever, I don't like reinventing the wheel, especially being in the mental health field, working in the mental health field. I would suggest what works. If it's a pastor, if it's a community of friends or a family. I think as adults, it's hard for us to ask those 3-word question, I need help. We don't want to say it. A lot of times we're just like, well, I got this. And sometimes it can make a big difference. And we're talking about our connections today, which actually help us ask those questions. So are we able to connect? Maybe we're not where we would like to be, but it's definitely beneficial when we try to address it. I'm going to start with a quote because people say it better than I do all the time. The person's name is Millard Fuller, and he says, for a community to be whole and healthy, it must be based on people's love and concern for each other. What comes to mind when you hear this quote?
Well, I'm reminded of another quote that says, no man is an island, which is so true. We all need each other, no matter how strong we might feel we are. At some point in life, we do need the support and help of people around us to be able to make it through certain situations.
And, a lot of times, it's okay to be alone sometimes. Sometimes we need a breather, have our time, put our boundaries up. But there's a sense of belonging that could be very helpful, especially in the community sense. Connecting has appeared to be increasingly hard nowadays. I've noticed it, especially the pace of life. It's like, how are you, Delia? I'm busy. Okay, where does it go? Like, where's that conversation go? Like, okay. But I'm going to ask you, what would you say to those people who say that they don't have enough time to connect, and why would you say it's important, especially today?
Having that connection with people is very important. I would think that it's something that's extremely important, because if you don't have it, your life would not be as full and as rich as it could be. You can get help and support from having other people in your life. If you're just trying to do everything on your own, sometimes that can lead to mental stress and mental illness. So it's so important that we reach out. And I know that there are some people out there, they like to help. There are some people out there, they're the first person to help if somebody needs help. Yeah. But when it's their turn, when they need help and somebody reach out to them, then they don't really want to accept the help. They struggle to accept the help. But it is really important that you accept help, because we need each other. We need each other at some point in time. And that connection can be a lifesaver sometimes.
I kind of, for me, working in the mental health field, it's humbling. It's actually kind of, the idea of I kind of jokingly say that as humans, we're both impressive and unimpressive at the same time, at the same state. So a lot of times
Mm,
that I need people. I'm not as good at
yeah.
thing, you know. At the same time, even if you're an introvert, and I know, I can say that, but even introverts need people. They need to be connect. They may need to connect in a different setting, but like you said, it's very important, especially in those moments. You don't know what the next day will bring you. We just got through COVID years. Several years of COVID. A lot of people lost people. A lot of
Yeah.
people no longer. There's an extra seat at the table, and
Mhm.
grief takes time to sort through and to process. And during that grief, connecting is more vital, to connect with others. A lot of times yeah, at the same time, knowing, having the ebb and flow, and this month is our connection. So it's not just, oh, I'm gonna help everyone, like you suggested. I'm gonna help everyone, but when people want to help me, no, 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 no. I think as adults, I know it's different culturally, culture to culture, but I would say as adults, it's hard for us to receive a gift. Once you hit
Mhm.
at an age when you're like teenagers and younger, you're like, yeah, give me everything, I'll take it. But later on, you're like, I don't want anything from anyone. I want to prove that I could do by myself. But sometimes that
Yes.
can be the biggest barrier when it comes to connecting with others.
Yes. Yeah. That you are so right with that. And sometimes, unfortunately, we realize our error when that person is no longer around. You know, that we
Hmm.
fail to connect with them,
Hmm.
and we see the importance of connecting with people, when they're not no longer around. So it could be your family, your church members, your friends. Take time to connect. Now, me personally,
Hmm.
I am more task oriented,
Hmm.
right? I focus on task and getting tasks done.
Hmm.
But I find myself evolving and becoming um, people purpose in
Hmm.
terms of stopping and chatting with somebody,
Hmm.
finding out how they're doing. Yes, so I find I'm becoming more people purpose, and I'm deliberately doing that because I realize that there are people out there who are suffering.
Hmm.
Some of them are suffering in silence. They don't know what to do, they don't know where to go, and they feel lost, and they need somebody to reach
Hmm.
out and
Hmm.
say something to them. We hear many stories of people saying that, oh, I'm so glad that you spoke to me because I was going to commit suicide or do something to hurt myself, but then
Hmm.
because you reached out to
Hmm.
me, I did not do it any longer. So you can actually save lives by connecting and
Hmm.
reaching out to people. So it's very, very important.
Yeah, it's the idea of the power of presence. Like, I'm here talking with you, but if I had my phone in front of me the whole time, kind of looking at you, sort of, not
Mm,
really connecting. I'm at the same time, you could be like, well, I'm super busy, but there's only 24 hours in a day, so it's really about prioritizing. We're not going to get more time. But I think what you mentioned something that made me think also about some of the problems or some of the things that we go through when we process through. It's not going to be fixed in one session. And I know, being task oriented, sometimes it's nice to get something done, completed. You're like, wow, it looks nice. Maybe you cleaned your house, whatever it is, you clean this area. Like, wow, I feel good. I feel accomplished. Unfortunately, when it comes to some of the things that we internalize, there's steps, and some of those steps don't have answers yet, because it takes time to get to those answers. But I like what Rachel Naomi Remen says. Perhaps the secret of living well is not having all the answers, but in pursuing unanswerable questions in good company. It's kind of funny how she kind of changes it at the end, but I think a lot of the curiosity of, I guess, the idea of, I don't have the answers yet, but let's
Mm,
try to see if we can work through it, kind of idea. Especially if it's a long problem, I'm struggling with this for some time. It's kind of unfair to put that much pressure that you're going to solve it in one sitting or in 1 week or in 1 month.
that
So that, yeah, so.
that is very true, Robert. And um, what came to mind when you were saying that quotation
Mm,
is is the fact that at times, sometimes, you might be going through a very hard struggle,
mm,
difficult situation.
mm-hmm,
But when you have somebody going through it with you, there with you, it,
mm,
it, it doesn't necessarily solve the situation, but it can make it a bit lighter. It
mm-hmm,
can make, it can give you more zeal and, strength to carry on and go through. So having somebody there with you, having that connection
mm,
with somebody who really care about you and who has your interests at heart,
mm,
that can make a huge difference
mm-hmm.
in the outcome of some difficult situations.
Yeah, I feel like the heaviness that can actually build up in our own minds. We could be our worst critics. We could procrastinate to paralysis. We could just, and a lot of times it's not that um we want to solve the problem, but a lot of times when we're connected, it does. One of the things I noticed, especially working with people, is that loneliness is is not to, how to say, minimize that. The loneliness makes the if someone there's a difference in context of the verbiage of being alone. I choose to be alone today. I'm going to work on things. Loneliness in the context of what I'm speaking of is a state that I'm lonely, and like I could be around thousands of people, I'm still lonely. And
Yes.
I've seen a lot of damaging choices, a lot of damaging um things can surround it. It could be, you could end up being bitter, about whatever you feel you have been wronged. There's a lot of things what loneliness can, and a lot of times we don't talk about in the context as lonely, because it seems that we feel that, oh, that's something you fix on your own, that kind of thing. But loneliness, I think, is something that it's important to recognize if you're struggling that way and find people that connect with you well. And I think, like Rachel Naomi mentioned, just understanding, and like you mentioned, finding pieces of that puzzle, whether it's at home, whether it's at church, or whether it's at work, whether wherever you congregate, you'll be surprised the impact you have, in both ways when you do connect. I want to
Yeah.
ask you a question to switch gears. What has helped you to stay connected with those around you? And we're going to give you a moment soon after this to share a little bit about your story. But what has helped you stay connected to those around you, and what did not help you stay connected?
Okay. What has helped me stay connected? Um, well, just wanting to be a part of, like, let's say, my family's life.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Just wanted to be a part of their life, try and support and help them in whatever way I can.
Mm-hmm.
That drives me, and my concern, the love that I have for them,
Mm-hmm.
the concern that I have for them, wanting to make sure that they're doing all right. That helps me to make sure that I stay connected to
Mm-hmm.
them. Okay. And also, in relation to, like, my church
Mm-hmm.
members, church, yes, in church, what has helped me to stay connected is that, knowing that we are all on the same journey. you
Mm-hmm.
know we are all Christians on a similar journey.
Mm-hmm.
and I like to share certain experiences that I have, give testimony when God has done something for me. I like to share my testimony and so on. So that helps me to stay connected with
Mm-hmm.
the church members as well. So yeah, basically that's it. The love that I
Yeah.
have for people, sharing my testimony of God's goodness. And
Mm-hmm.
what has not helped me, believe it or not, I naturally, I am an introvert,
Mm-hmm.
and I could stay. It's quite funny. It's quite funny, right? Because I can stay by myself without saying a word to anybody for like a whole day.
Mm-hmm.
That's how introvert I am. But at the same time, at times I can meet somebody for the first time and start chatting with them as though I knew them a long time. I'm
Yeah.
kind of it's kind of a two way personality that I have going on there. So it's a learning curve for me to like really reach out and connect
Mm-hmm.
with people. So sometimes because of my personality, my introvert, that prevents me from really connecting at times.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of saying anything and reaching out, I just stay by myself and stay quiet.
Yeah.
I'm
This.
afraid of what people might say as well, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of helps me to like just stay back and not connecting.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because a lot of times people, when it comes to the social anxiety or the socializing, whether it be in church or whatever environment, if you're more like you described, more of an introvert, it's suggested to try to share something, and if you're an extrovert that can't stop talking, it's suggested to listen. It's
Yeah.
kind of like you kind of change roles there. You can only practice what you practice, and you can only get better at what you kind of. So it's not so much like you're going to be like, okay, I'm now an expert because now I talked more. No, it's just that you get more familiar. If you're not connecting with anyone, it's kind of yeah,
It's
trial and
about
error. Yeah,
it's about having the right balance,
yeah,
knowing when to talk and knowing when to be quiet.
exactly,
It's about
exactly.
having the right balance.
But the practice element is important. Like if you're prone to kind of like not talk to, it's going to be increasingly difficult to maybe socialize, or especially if there's a conflict or something that you're speaking to some people who are not very happy about certain things. It gets more. It may get harder if you're not normally communicating
Yeah.
and at least making that attempt to be intentional of trying to communicate better, because it's one of the things that, especially nowadays, because we're all so busy, we overlook. I also do like that you mentioned family. I think a lot of times when we think about like mental illness or something of that nature, last year I remember for a podcast I put as the theme for Mental Health Awareness Month is May in the States is remembering their names. So the thing is, a lot of times the names have a lot of depth and value to something. If you like, so if I'm not connected to, if I don't understand mental health because I don't have family members or friends who are dealing with it, that's understandable, and we should be a little bit
Mm.
forgiving for our family, our parents, and people older than us because it wasn't a thing then. But
Back then.
however, if you remember the names, it's a little bit different. So the grandparent may not really understand mental health, but they may understand that they don't like their granddaughter to be sad or struggling or whatever that
Mm.
may be. So
Yeah.
it's kind of remembering our names, not so much the illness or whatever that may be. And I think that's
Mm.
fundamentally when we personalize it, understand that it can be helpful how we connect and even relate to things we're not really familiar with.
Yeah,
Now,
I agree. And also trying to like put yourself in the other person's shoe,
mhm,
trying to understand things from their point of view. That can be very helpful as well.
Yeah, like the old thing, let's quick to listen, slow to speak. A lot of times, just giving ourselves a little moment before we just say what's in
Mm,
our mind right away. We can learn a lot. I think a lot of the most uh, insightful, contemplative thoughts happen when I'm thinking about something that I didn't agree with or I didn't really understand, and flushing that
mm,
out. It may take time, but if you give yourself
mm,
time and not say, I don't have time for this, or you kind of prioritize, hey, I want to be better at connecting. Well, if I didn't want
mm,
to be better at connecting, then I wouldn't really care about understanding what's happening around me in
mm,
regards to people. So it starts from, why are we doing this? And
mhm.
now I want to give a little bit of moment. I like to give new guests and returning guests a time to share a little about your story, what brought you here, a little bit what you feel comfortable with sharing, and then anything you want to share with the audience. I'll put it in the notes if you want to share something that they could look up or what have you. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that.
Mm,
Well, I have written a book that is called "You Can Be Happy Again:
mm,
Bouncing Back After Infidelity, Betrayal, and Loss." Made number one for new releases on Amazon. It is available on Amazon. And this book came out of a very dark period of my life. And I
mm,
do feel as though I have found my purpose.
mm,
And sometimes when you go through difficulties, you come out on the other side,
mm-hmm,
and you in return you find your purpose. No,
mm-hmm,
my husband had an affair with my best friend,
mm-hmm,
and he got her pregnant
mm,
while he was a leader in the church.
mm,
And you would understand the emotional trauma and the depression and everything that I would have gone through. For
yeah,
over 3 years, I suffered in silence.
mm-hmm,
And nobody knew what I was going through. Not even my mother, I told what I was going through. And
mm-hmm,
because of that, I realized that there are people out there who are suffering in silence as well. They
mm-hmm,
don't know what their next step would be. They're confused, they're depressed. And this is the reason why I decided to write this book.
mm,
And we are talking about connection here. And I remember while I was going through that, one of my friends, she offered to help me because I had two young children at the time, ages 9 and 2. And sometimes I was so depressed, you
mm,
know, just lying in bed under covers, crying, and not having any energy to do anything, not even to make a meal for my kids. And one of my friends, thank God for her, she volunteered, and she came and stayed with me so that
mm,
she can help me, with the kids and so on, and kind of help me through that.
mm,
Now, if I did not accept that
mm,
help,
yeah,
that connection,
mm,
I'm sure my story would have ended a bit differently.
mm-hmm,
But I accept, because some people, when they're going through difficulties,
mm-hmm,
it's like they don't want anybody around. They just want to be by themselves. They pull away from everybody.
yeah,
Even those who care about them, they pull away. And
mm-hmm,
it's not the best thing to do. Because
mm-hmm,
when you're going through difficulties, you need help, you need support.
mm-hmm,
So I accepted my friend's help and my support. And
mm,
looking back, I am so happy that I did.
mm,
And even going through that experience, I
mm-hmm,
remember the trauma was so much on my body,
mm-hmm,
on me,
mm-hmm,
that I vomited at one point, physically vomited, because of, the trauma that I was going through. Because every time I saw them together, it's like a ball of negative feelings just rose up within me.
Mm-hmm.
The anger, the hurt, the pain, and everything, the resentment, everything just rose up inside of me. And it was not just affecting me mentally, it started to affect me physically as well, where I actually vomited one point. And somebody said to me, she said, Delia, you need to forgive them. And believe it or not, from the time I forgive them, those negative feelings just went. And there was just like a calm. So I'm saying that to say forgiveness, it is so important, you know, in making it through your difficult situations. And even in going through difficult situations, I remember I even fainted at one point. The trauma can be so much that I even fainted at one point. But one of the things that I would like to share with our listeners is that whenever you're going through whatever the situation is, it doesn't have to be the same thing like me. As Christians, always remember that God is right there with you. You are not alone. He is right there with you. And I remember one day I was lying in bed, very depressed and sad, crying, you know. And my 9-year-old son came in the room and he picked up the Bible that was on the dresser next to the bed and he gave it to me. And in that moment, he gave me 3 texts. And he didn't have any paper or anything. He just called them out from his memory, from his mind. And one of the texts was, for I know that all things work together for good to them that love the Lord, Romans 8:28. And 2 other texts, which I share in my book, right? And in that moment, I felt like God was speaking to me. Because these texts brought so much comfort. Comfort to me, it's like it's just the right thing that I needed in that moment. So no matter what you're going through, remember that God is right there with you. It can get lonely, and we talk about loneliness. You know, I was feeling lonely because I was married for over 10 years. And now, you know, all of a sudden I'm by myself. And that was a big change for me. I'd lost my husband and my best friend.
Yeah.
So it was, I felt lonely. But then again, I kept looking for the hand of God. Look for the hand of God whenever you're going through these difficult times. And do not be afraid, and don't push people away. Accept the help. Because you need it, and it would help you get through the tough times.
You know, I was listening to your story. I just remember forgiveness. You know, one thing about forgiveness is it's not that you don't agree with what happened to you, but you forgive so you can move on. The one thing that I would say is kind of mirroring your story a little bit, but I was in the military. I was struggling and issues I didn't know, mental health or whatever. I came out, went to, you know, support group, and I was bitter. You know why? Because I didn't have no support when I was in there. I just felt like all these other people, and even though I was right, Delia, in like maybe rationally right, I was wrong. And I'll tell you why. Because it didn't help me one lick. It actually kind of made it longer. You know, it made me more. It took longer to get to the point where it was like, even though I was right, like these people, but at the end of the day, I was just hurt. It took me longer. Took me longer to get through that healing because I thought being right was more important than, you know, just being. You know, that you're going through it. You know, in that regard. So.
I understand what you're saying there, Robert. And there's this famous quote that comes to my mind. It says, unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I remember one morning, while in my devotions,
Mm-hmm.
um, this came into my spirit, and it says, unforgiveness is like breathing in and never breathing out. Can you
Yeah.
imagine breathing in and never breathing out?
Yeah.
We have to have an outlet to let out the pain and the hurt and the anger and the resentment. We have to have an outlet to let it out. And
Mm-hmm.
forgiveness is
Mm-hmm.
the way of just letting all of these out. And what a lot of people don't realize is that forgiveness helps the forgiver more than the forgivee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was there
Mm-hmm.
suffering so much because I didn't forgive them. All this negative emotions and the tension and all of that. I was suffering. And it's not until I forgive that went. And I benefited. And that was a major part of my healing process. So there are a lot of people out there, they can't heal. They're not healing
Mm-hmm.
because they have all of these negative feelings
Mm-hmm.
bottled up inside. They haven't
Mm-hmm.
forgiven. They haven't
Mm-hmm.
tried to move on.
And it's not only just forgiving the person who hurt you, but yourself. Yourself.
Mm,
The
that's
thing is,
good.
the healing takes as long as it takes. A lot of
It
times
does.
we have this arbitrary clock, and one of the things I've noticed is I shouldn't be here. This shouldn't happen. Shouldn't until it becomes unuseful. It becomes
Mm,
less useful. The ideal,
mm,
extreme. We mentioned this before. Extreme cases is someone who loses a loved one. Are you going to tell
mm.
them how fast or long
Exactly.
they would? You don't. And sometimes, and we think of loss as losing someone. Now, of course, you lose someone you love, but there's different kind of losses. People lose
There
their
is.
financial fact, like if someone gets an illness that they're not able to work anymore, that's a loss in
Yes,
itself. Or
yes,
mobility,
yes.
loss of
Yes.
relationship. So I
Yeah,
think that.
you are so right. And you brought a very good point there just now, in that people forgive at their own rate. There is no time to say, oh, you should get over this within
Mhm,
this period of time. And I remember when the person told me that I needed to forgive my friend and my husband, it was a struggle because I knew to myself that I could not do that
mhm,
without divine help. And I
mhm,
remember I prayed. It didn't just happen instantly.
mhm,
I prayed.
mhm,
Sometimes at night when I can't sleep, I lie in bed and I pray and I ask God for the strength to forgive. Because as Christians, the Bible says if you can't forgive others, I can't forgive. God says He can't forgive us
mhm,
if we don't forgive others. So
mhm,
I know it was it's like took a couple of months of
mhm.
that praying, and I'm trying to get the strength to be able to forgive. So it didn't just happen instantly,
Yeah.
so with it, some people are easier to forgive than others or move on than others, but there is no time to say within this time you should stop grieving for this person or you should forgive this person.
Mhm,
And I remember when I was going through my depression, it's not until a lady, she was a counselor from our church, she called me and I was telling her what I was feeling. I felt as though I had no energy to do anything. I
mhm,
felt so sad and didn't want to do anything and stuff like that. And she was saying to me, Delia, you are grieving the loss of your husband and your best friend.
mhm,
And at that point, I didn't realize that grieving or
mhm,
going through the stages of grieving also happen when you lose
mhm,
through divorce or what. I only associated grief
mhm.
with death.
Yeah.
And as you rightly said, grief, You can grieve loss of your finances, loss of people, and in different ways. So it's not just, through death.
Yeah. And I was thinking about a lot of times you mentioned the Bible, some verses. When I think about Jacob and wrestling with God, like a lot of times, like when the struggles, when I being Christian, so I know not everyone listening is maybe faith based or not, and that's why I love this opportunity with Revive Ministries to kind of, when you have those medical missions and you go to other countries and you help. I'd like to give a platform so we could continue the dialogue. One thing I would say churches sometimes don't do well enough is they put this stuff under the rug because it's messy
Mm,
and it's just too
mm,
hard to talk about. But I
mm,
think we can celebrate that we're all human, and at the
yeah,
same time, I find comfort, just like you mentioned. I find comfort, the Emmanuel, God with us, God is with us.
yeah.
That kind of, and the other aspect of that is there's this one portion, and because I wasn't in the faith till I was older in my adult life,
Mm,
was there's a part in the Old Testament where it said that God has no end, like edges, which I like because it kind of makes me feel that God, like there's not something we could put in a little box in the sense of that.
mm,
So there's something comforting of that unknown, and also that you have something outside of yourself. They
mm,
always say it's
yeah.
hard to kind of heal, especially when there's people so close to it. You can't be a doctor to your family. You can't be a lawyer to your family. You're too close. So you're going to be biased.
Yes.
You're going to be. So
Yes.
at the same time, it's nice to find something that you could ground you, that doesn't get yourself in the way of yourself. If that makes sense when it
I
comes to.
understand. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, because at times when people, when they read my book and they realize, the trauma and everything that I went through, they're like, um, how did your faith help you going through this?
Mm,
And I often say, at times, honestly, at times I felt like God was not there.
yeah.
I felt alone. I felt like God had forsaken me. But
Mm,
even with those feelings,
mm,
I always held on to God. I always held on to my faith. I never let go, because I knew if it wasn't for God and my faith, I
mm,
would not have been able to make it through that situation.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
was a very, very difficult situation. If I didn't hold on to God and my faith, it would have been a different story. I might have gone mentally insane, or might have done something crazy and hurt myself or hurt them.
Mm-hmm.
You hear all the crazy stories about what happens. I call it the dark side of infidelity, which
Mm-hmm.
I talk about in my book. And we're talking about connections here.
Mm-hmm.
And even after, as I said, I feel like I have a mission. I'm very passionate about this mission. And my mission is to help 10,000 and more women, people find happiness again.
Mm. Yeah.
And this is why I put myself out there. If there's
Mm-hmm.
anybody who's listening to me and they feel as though that they're really struggling, and
Mm-hmm.
they feel like they don't know, where, what to do, where to go next, they feel alone, and they just want to reach out and find out, how did I make it, what can I, what advice I would give them. I mean, I'm not a therapist, but sometimes it's good to talk to somebody who have made it through a difficult situation,
Mm-hmm.
because they're able to understand your situation better. So I do
Mm-hmm.
put myself out there. Anybody who is listening, they want to reach out to me, um, they can contact me on my email address, which is you can be happy again,
Mm-hmm.
figure two at gmail.com. They can contact me, and then I can drop them my number, and we can take it from there, because I believe that there people out there who are really suffering in silence, and I want to make that connection, to make a difference, and to help others, which I think is so important.
Yeah. And just those who are listening, All that information will be in the notes underneath, so you could reach out to Delia, and you can find out. Also, I'm gonna put in what she mentioned, her book that's on Amazon. All those links will be underneath, so I would encourage you guys to check it out. As we wrap up, I want to ask you. We talked about a lot. It's been wonderful to have you on, Delia. I want to ask you, and you mentioned a lot of lessons, but what has been one of the biggest lessons you learned when it comes to connecting, or maybe better yet, what are one of the biggest lessons you learned going through what you've been through and still
Mhm.
connecting? Let's go there. Let's
Mhm.
make it a little bit more
Okay.
appropriate.
All right. Yes. So, the thing is, in my book, at the end of each chapter, I do have some important lessons that I learned.
Mm,
Because what I would like to do, I would like people to look at my experience and
mm,
try and avoid making the same mistakes that I made. Try and make better decisions. So, at the end of each chapter, I do have lessons that
mm,
I have learned. And
mm,
also, there are a lot of tips there. Chapter 9 talks about how we can find happiness again. There are a number of tips there. Knowing
mm,
when to let go. I also deal with forgiveness
mm,
and loving yourself, spending time with yourself and taking care of yourself. Because as women, sometimes we get caught up taking care of the husband, taking care of the children,
mm,
doing the chores, maybe
mm,
pursuing our career, and we don't stop and take
mm.
time for ourselves. And that can be quite detrimental in terms of your mental well-being, where the stress level is so high, and it's like you don't recharge. We need
Mm.
time to recharge, stop
Yeah.
and recharge, so that we
Mm.
can go again.
Uh,
And
so go ahead. Sorry.
yes, and it's so important that we try and reach out and help each other. So one of the things that I have learned is, it's made me want to be more. It made me. My experience has made me want to connect more with others because
Mm,
I want to help them.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's one of the major things that has I have gained throughout all of this, the desire and the need to connect more. Draw away from the introvert bit and,
Mm.
reach out more and connect more.
Yeah, there's this idea of healthy tension. Healthy tension is
Mm.
putting yourself out there. As a kid, your parents might have you do something you didn't want to do, but they're encouraging you to kind of get yourself out there. But one thing I also, looking at notable people in history, I think of Albert Einstein, and a lot of people are like, oh, he's just smart. But one thing he says, and I thought like what he says, I have no special talent. I'm only passionately curious. I encourage everyone to
Mm.
stay curious. When we're little, we're curious. We work things out. Why is this? We may irritate our parents. Why? But at the same time, ask yourself why. Why are you struggling? Why? Maybe
Mm.
maybe staying more present. Maybe, just like you say, if you're an introvert, maybe it's best that you try to get out of your shell. Do
Yeah.
something, yeah, and say, oh, I never do that. Well, being a little bit uncomfortable, it's not always so bad. A lot of times we learn a lot from ourselves. And I just,
Mhm.
and I also would say, thank you. Thank you, Delia, for coming on. It was great to have you and sharing your thoughts. And those who are listening, like I said, all her information, how to reach her, how to find her book will be in the notes. Any final thoughts you want to share?
Okay. I just want to encourage people to, if you're struggling, if you're don't stay and suffer in silence. Reach out, try and make connections, try and talk to somebody. And on the flip side of that, if you see somebody struggling, don't just ignore them. Try and reach out, try and connect, because we all need each other.
Yeah.
We that God made us like that. We are social people.
Mhm.
You know, we need to socialize and connect with each other. So my encouragement is to stay connected, be connected, and most of all, stay connected to God.
Mm. And I would say a little self care is better than no self care. So
Mm,
if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you need to take that break. Take that break.
yes.
Learn to say no. Sounds weird, but learn to say no sometimes.
Mm,
And I just want to say thank you so much, Delia, for coming on and sharing your insight. I want to share with those who are listening, watching. Remember to stay updated with Revive Ministry throughout various platforms. ReviveMinistriesFL.com is our website. You can listen to the audio there. We have links to YouTube where you can also see the video version. I'm going to leave you with this last quote. I think it's appropriate. And it's from Coretta Scott King. You know, the greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members.
mm.